Good evening. The time is now 7 p.m. Welcome to the Finance Committee of February 27th, 2025. Just a reminder, this meeting is being taped by our friends at WCTV. Any public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. We'll start with the roll call. John Doherty, excused. Mary Ann Galezzo.
Here.
Chris Diorio, excused. Brad Jackson.
Here.
Andy Levine.
Here.
Joe Lovino.
Here.
Anthony Nelson.
Here.
And Scott Neville.
Here.
And Teresa Manganelli, present. Great, okay, so, welcome, everybody. Joe, Chief?
Yeah, I think I'm first out of the gate here. Good evening, everyone.
How are you?
Good. So, obviously, however you want to do this, I was going to just do a brief sort of overview, and then we can get into capital and operating budget, however
Okay.
you want to do it. And
Let me
please-
just remind the board, the budget is on page 32, capital is on page 74.
Thank you.
Okay, you're all set, Joe.
Okay, so with that, certainly our mandate is what it always has been, which is to provide the best service we can for the community as it relates to, public safety, protection of life and property, and quality of life. So I can tell you that we're not getting any less busy. Calls for service this year, we're just under 25,000 calls for service. It's about 1,000 uptick from last year. Some good news on things we've discussed in the past. One of them is personnel. So we've been struggling to hire people. We're finally making progress on that. In fact, as of last week, we had 52 bodies for 52 positions. 3 of them were in the academy. But then Pat Nally, one of our detectives, retired on Friday, so now we're down 1 again. And we have a couple more retirements coming up. So we are going to be playing catch-up. But we're in a far better position than we were before. At one point, we were down almost 10 people, which you can imagine what that does to our budget, especially the overtime.
Right.
So good progress there. On the overtime, again, our biggest cost is our shift replacement, so having the bodies certainly helps. You notice in the budget, there seems to be an increase if you look at the numbers from year to year when it pertains to salaries, but that's mostly because we were without a contract, the patrolman without a contract for over 3 years. And the supervisors were, I think, 2 years. So those numbers you see now are just catching up on the retroactive pay for that, which also I'm a little concerned about. That's what can increase our overtime. Well, obviously, they're making more money per hour, so that it can affect the overtime, which is why we asked for a little increase this year. The other thing that, can put a strain on our budget year to year is the amount of community events, which are great. We love the 4th of July, we love the Fall Fest. They're all great community events, but public safety, it does put a strain, as it does with fire and DPW, on the services that we provide. And again, in this particular year, I believe the entire 4th of July celebration is in this fiscal year. So that's something, at the end of our fiscal year, we're gonna have to make sure that we have enough money to cover that. But all in all, I think our approach to this budget is conservative, as it always has. In fact, in some of the discretionary spending, we've actually reduced it a little bit. So the biggest increases you see are in salary, and then we have 3 capital requests, which if you want, we can get into those now, unless you have specific
Let's just see,
questions.
does anybody have any questions on the budget before we talk about capital? Okay, go
Just to go back to the 4th of July,
Yep.
the town gives 25,000 to the 4th of July. How is that? 50,000, sorry. How is that broken down? Does that cover any of overtime for the departments? Or is that just a straight give to the 4th of July committee?
So that's an excellent question, and that's something that I have to sort out. Unfortunately, that it was already set up when I started,
Right.
so we're going to start having our meetings about the 4th of July upcoming. And I'm not sure how they've done it in the past. I think my opinion is that should go towards paying department services first.
Absolutely.
And then the remainder should go towards the 4th of July committee. I'm just not sure how it was done in the past.
When you get that answer, can you let us know?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, we can go to budget now.
All right, if we want to dive into the capital requests,
Capital, excuse me.
I think we should probably start off with the subject that we've talked about many times before, and that is our upgrading of the tasers. This is something we have talked about doing for a couple of years now, and I think we're kind of at a crucial point where we need to do something. That being said, when we dealt with the rep from Axon, this is the same rep that was dealing with Jeff during the issues the last time, looking for a contract. And we told him point blank that, this committee was not happy with the way Axon did business 8 years ago. So that has to be taken into consideration when you offer us this deal, whatever it is for the upgrade. And we believe they have done that. I have a handout which I can give
These
you.
were literally the bad cops. How cool is that?
But you know what? If I could use it for leverage to get,
Absolutely.
money, I'm gonna take it. And let me just hit some highlights. So the request is for, let's see what the total is. And I've talked to some other chiefs who are also doing this year, and the price tag is somewhere over $300,000. Ours, I believe, is 147. I have to find it here. And why that is, so we're getting 52 of them, because that's where we are. And the trade-in value that they're giving us for the X2s is over $50,000 alone. That's, the total discount that they're giving us, I think, is about 46% in savings, which far exceeds the normal rates that Axon would give a customer. I don't want to mention the town, because I don't want to start a bidding war with Axon, but this particular town is going from the X7s, which is a newer model than the X2s, to the X10s. And again, I don't know how many they're getting, but the price tag is over $300,000. So our ask is for the 147. And again, I don't want to take up all the time here if you want to ask any questions, but I think they went a long way into, I don't know if they're making us whole from the last time, but certainly doing much better by us financially with this offer.
So what I'm hearing you say is that we're going to have a copy of the purchase agreement and an actual invoice.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll give you, I have it broken down as far as what the discount is too.
Okay.
So you'll have all the financial information. I'll give you that, absolutely.
What's the discount?
So the standard pricing for 52 of the Taser 10s would be $273,000. With the special deal they're offering this police department, the total cost of 125 is basically a 46% discount. That's with the $50,000 in savings from the buyback from the X2s and a $75,000 credit on the previous X2 contract. So they're trying, this was the old TAP program that, they didn't honor. So they are trying to at least make that right.
So I've asked this before, and I mean this with all due respect, because
Yep.
I fully support having tasers, and have since you first brought it up.
Yep.
I know back when we first got them, we utilized it once at the train station. This is going back a number of years now.
Yeah.
Besides training and testing that you do routinely, have you used it since then?
So this
And
year.
it's okay if you haven't, but I just want to know.
This year we've had one, what they call a full deployment, which is
Okay.
someone got tased. And we've had 4 what they call displays. So an officer had to take the taser out and was going to use it, instructed the person to calm down or de-escalate, however you want to put it, and that person complied, they put the taser away.
Great. Okay.
Those are last year's numbers, 2024.
Okay. And is that sort of routine, what you would have expect normally in a year?
Now that tasers are out in the public, people know what they are, they know what they do, everyone sees the TikTok and the YouTube videos, there's no one out there that doesn't know what these things do, and if anyone's ever been tased before, it's not an experience they want to do again. So the hope is, we never really have to deploy them as much, just the threat of you having it and displaying it can get people to comply.
Right.
And certainly we want to do that, it is part of a whole thing that we do as far as de-escalation. Certainly we prefer something like this than the alternative.
Right, totally. Okay, thank you. Anybody else, questions on the taser? Joe? I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I have to
so-
start turning to you first.
I'll go after Joe.
Okay.
So this is a contract that we would have with them for over,
Yes, it would be 5 years.
Yeah,
The deal's
okay,
5 years.
so
It's
yes.
spread over 5 years.
just under $30,000 each year that we're paying for it.
That's correct.
So this might be more of a question for the board here than you, but we talked, I forget which department it was, about if something should be a capital item or it should be in their budget. Where this,
I think this is definitely capital.
it would be capital?
Yeah, because it's equipment that, that they're getting, and the price is $125,000. Are they charging us over a 5-year period, but giving us the full order of tasers year
Yes.
one?
Yes, we would
Okay.
get the full order.
So we have budget payments?
Absolutely,
Okay.
they break it up in 5 payments.
Okay, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
yeah, I'm comfortable with it.
So it's
Yeah.
a lease essentially. You get
Yeah.
a lease,
Yeah.
5-year lease.
Joe?
Thanks, Chief. How long does a taser last if they're barely used? Do the batteries run out over a period of time, and does the contract include any type of upkeep or battery replacement?
Sure, so we do our own maintenance, and part of it is software that they download, I think probably every 2 or 3 months, they'll download, and they can find out any issues with the taser, and they can correct it there. Now, the X2s that we have now, one of the problems is they don't service them anymore, but they've worked fine for us. And we've had them, because of the issues we did have, there was, the thought that we would have tasers for 10 years without having to buy new ones. And we did stretch it to, I guess, this would be 8 years now. But, they've worked fine when they've had to work. I just don't feel, we don't feel very comfortable pushing the envelope much longer. Plus, they don't service them now, and that's how a lot of, companies get you, is we're not offering the parts. We don't sell it anymore, and pretty soon you're not gonna be able to get parts for it.
Thank you.
Mary Ann?
So the 5 years.
Yes.
What does the contract entail? Does it entail with cartridges? Are they promising you again new tasers after the 5 years, like they did last time?
No, there's no promise for that this time. We're getting these 52, and then at the end of the 5 years. But I fully anticipate we wouldn't have to get new ones in 5 years. I mean, we stretched it out this long, so unless there's, something wrong with this model, I would certainly hope that they get better as they improve the model.
How long have we had these, the current ones?
We've had them since 2017.
Yeah, it was fiscal year 2018, that was 2017,
Yeah.
so fiscal year 2018.
So 7 or 8
Seven,
years?
yeah.
Okay.
So does the contract come with cartridges? Do you get a
Yes.
percentage every year? And
Yep.
what is the warranty on the taser?
I think the warranty is, I think, a standard year warranty with them. So they'd be warranted for the year. And then after that, I don't think, they will certainly offer us, certainly a plan to get into. We're not at that point yet, where I would want to get into a service plan, but,
Because if I remember the TAP program before,
yeah.
that was the big attraction, was that if anything went wrong with the tasers, you got a new one.
Yeah.
So this program doesn't offer that, correct?
I believe it's just for the year. I will get you an answer for that, though, but I don't
Do
want to say
you
it's
have an
more than-
actual physical contract with
No,
them at this point?
what I have here, and I will give you a copy of it, is, because it hasn't been voted on yet, it's just basically it's an invoice that lists everything that they're offering us and the price of everything.
It's a quotation.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, so the problem last time was that
That
They
became
went-
our invoice.
There
in
was
in
no
our
other backup.
contract.
That was the problem.
Well,
Yeah.
the quotation should have all the terms and
It
conditions.
does not.
Yeah,
Well, let's
Well,
let's
I
get a
think what's-
copy of it and then we'll,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you understand, this is not directed at you.
No.
We're
Oh, no,
dealing with.
No, it's the company.
But I
yeah.
just think,
Right.
for those who might be watching, this is
Absolutely.
an important purchase, but
Mm-hmm.
we're also dealing with some trust issues with the vendor
Mm-hmm.
that we want to be sure we're all doing our due diligence and not jumping down the same path without dotting all the i's and crossing all the t's. So I just think it's important for the people at home to understand that this is not directed at the local authorities, but
Right.
rather
Absolutely.
directed at the vendor that, we have
No, that's an important point, and
some issues with.
I shared some of those concerns. I was kind of late in the game in this, coming on board after the deal was made. But certainly on the surface, we were offered something that, wasn't eventually honored. It's, I guess, a nice way of putting it. But we have more leverage in other technologies because there's different companies out there. But, Axon is kind of the gold standard with these things. If we get to the point for, we're talking about going to body cameras, Axon offers a good one, but so does Motorola. But with tasers, it's kind of, they're the gold standard. So, as chief, I have to go with the best product out there.
Can I say something? It's not a question, but more of a statement. It's about $600 per year per person, is what it comes down to, right?
Yeah.
Which is less than $2 a day for these tasers, right? Versus the alternative, like you say.
Right.
So, I agree. For me, from a cost perspective, that's not a concern, but the contract is a concern. Like, we don't want to find ourselves in a couple of years saying, hey, what did we negotiate? What are the terms? So I totally agree that it is the contract that we just need tightened up from them.
And at the end of the day, we want to keep everybody safe. We want to keep our police officers safe. We also want to keep whoever they're interacting with from going to another level. So, it makes sense to support the program.
Can I ask a clarification question?
Sure.
So was the issue with the vendor them not meeting their contractual obligations?
Well, the issue was that they did not provide a purchase agreement. So we didn't have a document that tied everything up and told us exactly what we were getting, the warranties, the cost, at one point, there was a tail end replacement. If you replaced it by year 5, if I remember correctly,
Right.
then you would get either free tasers to replace them at year 5, which ended up not happening. Our tasers were working fine. So we've waited a few years, and we're still on the original set. But the problem was paperwork. And again, it was not through the chief's fault. His company just made the deal and didn't tie it up.
There
And
were
it was,
oral representations made during the
Right.
procurement that were never reduced to writing, so they were unenforceable.
So it wasn't that they weren't meeting contractual obligations, they would just never got into a contract?
Pretty much.
right.
Okay.
And I think
We
the
had
board
nothing to-
back then, they believed we were getting 10 years of tasers. And that we would get replacements in the 5th year. And I think some people felt that would be like the newest edition we would get. And then that wasn't the case. You would just get replacement X2s, which is the edition we had. And it didn't come with any cartridges or anything. Wasn't exactly what the board had felt, or I think the department had felt they were gonna get.
Okay.
Looking at the contract we have, and we can supply it to you through the manager, it does include a extended warranty, which the estimated start date is a year after the initial purchase and would go through 2030, so 2026 through 2030. But we can get.
So
this-
that would be the life of
that
the
would be the 5
contract.
years,
That
yeah,
would be
life
the
of
5 years.
Yep.
But that's at
That's
another
part of-
cost?
This is part of the,
Is
no,
that-
this is built in, it's an
To
additional
this
cost,
quote,
but
I
it's
guess.
built into the request for the capital.
Oh, okay, so you are
So
doing
it
an
wouldn't
extended
relate-
Yeah, I
warranty.
didn't realize that was part of the deal. I thought it was
Okay.
the standard,
Okay,
so
so
that's actually even
Is,
better.
is the extended warranty in this dollar amount, or
Yeah.
is it
Yeah.
on
It's
top of it?
included in the
Oh,
one.
okay.
Yeah.
So that's on top of whatever the contract is for the tasers, or?
No, this is included in the 147,750, I
Okay.
believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not extra.
Okay. And you have that in actual writing from
Yes.
We can,
Exxon
like I
that
said,
they
we
would
can supply
have?
this
Yeah.
to you through the manager if you'd like.
Yeah, if we,
Yep.
is that signed off on? Is that contract?
Signed
then-
by Exxon?
Yeah, yes,
Been
the
signed
quote's
off?
signed off, but it's just obviously pending approval, from the town. But yes.
Okay.
The quote, we had to sign the quote just to lock in this price,
Mm-hmm.
which has been locked in.
Okay. Could you get that to us as soon as possible? So that we have time to look through it and formulate any questions we might have, and we're not going to call you back in for that?
Sure.
But it's maybe something that we could gather, if there are questions, there may not be, gather one email and have it sent off to you.
Okay.
And,
And the only other thing I would mention, when we talk about contracts, without the TAP program, I think it's a pretty straightforward deal, so that the document we provide for you is probably gonna be considered the contract. But I will certainly look into that if they'll offer anything more. I think that was part of the problem when Jeff was looking for it the last time. I think the company said, well, you have the contract, it's the quote. But with the
Yeah.
TAP program, they had listed a bunch of
Exactly.
things that weren't on there.
Exactly.
So I think this might be a little different scenario, because they're not offering any bells and whistles other than what's on this.
Right, so you're not entering into what we'll refer to as the TAP program
Correct.
you did before.
Right.
You're pretty much buying these outright.
Yep, and the deal that we're getting is the deal that you'll see here.
Right, which is the amount for the tasers, and not some sort of replacement 5 years down the road.
Correct.
Okay.
In this agreement, which you'll see, there is language regarding the previous TAP program, and all TAP obligations from this contract will be considered fulfilled upon execution of the quote, so.
And that would tie into your credit that they're
Exactly,
giving
yes,
you.
Exactly.
Right, right. So they're calling us all
Quid
equal
pro
now.
quo.
Yep.
I forget my procurement law. This a $147,000 purchase. Is this gotta go out to bid? Does it, 3 quotes? I forget what the number is.
Yeah,
The
so-
Or is it a-
problem is
Or
that
is it a
there's no,
sole, or is it a sole source procurement?
there's no other company, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, is it, then it would be a sole source
Axon's on the
procurement?
state, they're on the state bid
Yeah.
list?
Yeah.
So they're on the state bid list, so once they're on the state bid list, you're authorized to negotiate with them
Right, okay.
without going through.
Right. Thank you.
And probably Company B wouldn't take the trade-in value, right, from the previous.
Giving us $40,000 off to go away. Take it.
okay, any more on the tasers? All set, okay. All right, so the next, the cruisers.
All right, cruisers this year, we're looking for 3, and again, we're trying conservative approach to this. For those of you who remember, the standard ask used to be 5 cruisers every year. For most of my time in the department, it was 5 a year. Since I've been chief, we're trying to do it based on what our need is, based on the formulas for miles and things like that. So under that formula consideration, we're looking to replace 3 cruisers this year. And another part of the formula that I'll just mention is, as I'm sure you're aware of, the time it takes to get cruises is conservatively a year. Sometimes it might even be more than that. So we have to factor in what the miles now and what the mileage will be once we actually get the cruises. So that's why sometimes when you're looking at mileage, you might say, well, why are we replacing this now? Well, we're not. It's 12 months, 13, 14 months from now.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that you have, since you became chief, you have tried very hard to cut down on buying just flat-out 5 vehicles every year. And that's not lost on the Finance Committee, so thank you for keeping that under control.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
So I know we've had cruises that have been in accidents throughout the year.
Yes.
How many have been replaced? How many have been totaled for the year?
Total, for 2024?
Yep.
There was 3, I believe.
So we've totaled 3 cruisers?
Yeah.
And have
Were
you,
replaced.
do you have replacements for those now?
Yes.
So
We're not
they're
waiting on
already in
any
your
cruises.
fleet, the 3 new ones?
Correct.
And when did you receive them?
They were kind of scattered, but.
This year, right?
Yes, this year,
So you have 3 new cruises for this year?
yeah.
And you're
Replacement.
asking for 3 new cruises for next year to replace how many mileage on? How many do you send out 5, right, per shift?
Yeah, usually there's, best case scenario, we have a rover, so we have 3, 4, and then plus the supervisor 5.
So 5.
The
And there's
ones,
3 right now that are the new cruises that replace the total ones, are they out in the front line?
yes,
So then the 3 that you're asking are gonna be another 3 on the front line?
yeah, well, they're gonna, yes, but they'll be replacing, I believe, the 31, 32, and 33. And then we have plans for instance, the old 31 will become the new 22, which is our school resource officer car. The old 22 has 92,000 miles on it. So again, by the time we get that, we're well over 100. The new 32, the old 32 will become the new 26. That'll become an admin car, so we'll strip it down, paint it, and keep using it as an admin car. And then the new 33, same thing. That'll become the new 19, another admin car. So we try, whatever we're ready to replace because of mileage, we still, get use out of them. And then they also, those cars will be transferred to the DPW, which they will still even get more use out of. They just need to come off the line.
Go ahead, Scott.
Just looking through our vehicle book that we have here.
Yep.
And the animal control officer, the what I would say is the recommendation is the fiscal year replacement date is 2026, but it's not in our 5-year capital plan.
Right.
So do we have another source for that, or is that gonna be lasting another 5 years, or? do we
Well,
just-
not another 5. But we can push that off because of the type of vehicle it is, the type of miles it gets. It's in
Okay.
pretty good shape. I mean, he's
Okay.
almost ready, but we're squeezing as much as we can out of that.
Okay, but at some point, we will see that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Just a basic question, what's the average number of miles a year that one frontline cruiser accumulates? I mean, range or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, for most of them, you're talking, 24/7.
Yep.
And again, when we talk mileage, it's not like, you sit in at home. It's
No, I
They have
understand.
a formula for it, so. I would say the average, at least per year is probably,
I still 40,000.
I can
I was
tell you
gonna
on
say
the night
more
shift,
than that.
I take car 35, I put 100 miles on it a night. So
which
average,
is standard.
They're not easy miles.
No.
And the
Well,
trend
it's
is
more idle
changing.
miles.
Yeah, and idling,
There it is,
they
it's
idle a
idling
lot,
miles.
right?
Exactly, I was just gonna say that the trend
Idle,
is changing
yeah.
towards engine hours, which would
Exactly.
include that idle and when they're at a scene. and-
I like boats. Measure my hours.
Oh, that's interesting, thank you. Hadn't thought of that.
All right, Chief.
Okay, the last capital would be, we are looking to replace our community policing trailer. And, again, I have a handout with some photographs from our current trailer, which was purchased with grant money, I think in 2000. It was a community policing grant that we got it for. And for people at home, the only time you really see it now is at the 4th of July celebration. That's the trailer we use there. It's in pretty tough shape. It's leaking, it's rusting in parts, and I think we've gotten as much life out of it as we can, especially where we didn't pay for it originally. At least it didn't come out of, our capital back then. And the DPW has done an outstanding job of maintaining it and trying to get it in shape every year, at least for the 4th of July. but it's time to replace it. We'd also would like to do more things with the new trailer. You know, the Fall Fest looks like it's here to stay. We talked about maybe taking it to Yentile Farm and, you know, positioning someone there, you know, during the summer and things like that. So there are things that we would want to do more with the new trailer, which I think that we can, you know, better serve the community than the one that we currently have, which just really is getting to the point where it's just not safe to use anymore.
It's been a couple of years since you've put it in the mall, the Demoulas Mall.
We used to,
At
when we
Christmas
first got it,
time?
we used to,
Yeah.
that was, I think, one of our first uses of it.
Yeah. I think
Before
that's
they
a
did
really
the-
effective
Before they
thing
did
to
the
do.
reconfiguration,
Yeah.
because we used to use the power from the large sign out front in the parking lot.
Oh,
Yeah, we used to plug into that, so. And this current one will have its own generator, so that's one of the upgrades we're looking for, because we won't have to tap in any power. Even for the 4th of July, we need Reading Light to come in and tap into power for it. So this one can be sustained on its own.
very good.
Is it still a tow trail?
Yes, yeah.
And this is one we can tow with the pickup truck that we have in our fleet, whereas now we rely on the DPW to tow the current trailer, the weight limits.
Right.
That thing has lived a long and useful life. The only way we should put it out at the 4th of July now is if we cover it with a big
Yeah, it's-
black tarp.
Yeah, I don't want to use embarrassing, but
It is done. It's duty.
Chief, can I ask you, can we jump ahead to an item for FY '28? And it's body cameras?
yes,
So this is another thing I'm thrilled to see.
yep.
I'm just wondering, because I know in the past we've talked about, you've been talking about this briefly for many years.
Right.
The union approval was a
Right.
big thing. Have we received that?
No, that's why we've put it in, looking towards the future here, because we are coming up on contract negotiations, and we've talked with the manager, and that's something we want to, push for in there. We'd like to get the wording first in the agreement with the unions, and then we can go ahead with
Okay.
asking for the money. Closest we came, we did have a grant
Yeah.
that they were offering, but it was dependent on union, and we just couldn't get both unions to agree, so, we're hoping this time now that, times have changed, and studies have shown that it actually helps the offices more than hinders them. So I think the attitude is changing with them, and, certainly they have concerns, they want to make sure they address and how it's going to be used, how it's going to be watched, discipline, things like that. So we can address those, I think, through contract negotiations and hopefully come to an agreement.
Okay. Good luck. That'd be
Thank
great.
Thank you.
And then apply for the grant again.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Does anybody have any other questions for police? No?
Yeah. If we're still on the subject of grants, I'd like to point out, I know the committee sometimes asks about those, and we currently still have our grant through the Cummings Foundation, so that's $30,000 a year. We do a lot of our community outreach, the RAD program, Police Explorers, Citizens Police Academy, CPR, things like that, we fund through that. We got an earmark this year from the state of $50,000 to start our drone program, which we're very excited about. It should be enough money to buy a good, some good equipment, train the offices and get that up and running, so we're excited about that. We got a $35,000 federal grant to pay for a piece of equipment which detects drugs in the field, so you can, if you have a substance you don't know what it is, you use this device and it'll tell you exactly what it is. It's very accurate. It's an expensive piece of equipment, but again, we got that through a federal grant. And
But that would just be,
There was
but that would just be one piece of equipment, right?
that's just one piece of equipment, but it's paid for, it's
Right.
ours, and we.
So you'd have to call in the car that has it if you're in the field and you want to test
Yeah, we've
something.
trained, I think, there were 8 people trained in it, and, when it's needed, it'll come out, but it's a
Yeah.
valuable piece of equipment when you can think about, you're in the field and you don't know what a substance is.
And we've also been able to deploy the Safety Net program, which was funded by the Wilmington Community Fund and WOW, to help our vulnerable seniors in the community and youth. We've been successful in being able to enroll people in that program.
Good. That's great. You all set, Andy? Yeah?
One final thing.
I knew it.
Sorry, not a question. Just
Everybody knew who was gonna have the last word.
National Night Out.
Yes.
Every year, my family looks forward to going.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for what you guys put on there. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Just wanted to say thank you.
We're looking forward to it again this year.
Great. All right, Chief. Thank you
All right,
very much.
Thank you all.
Great
And we will get this to
presentation.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What page?
Hi, Chief.
Hi,
How are you?
good, how are we?
Good.
It's been a long time.
I know.
Guys are great. When's everyone's birthday? All right, so, it's a tough act to follow up, usually is, but it's okay.
We can put you first next year if you like.
No, it's okay. We usually flip a coin when we come in, I just didn't have anything in my pocket, so let them go first. So I'm gonna go right off the bat to my favorite subject to talk about with you guys,
Overtime.
Mary Ann.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Let's have that conversation.
Overtime. All right, so let's talk about overtime. So, in the last year, last fiscal, we were a little bit up from where we wanted to be, but this year, we are on track to do right around $1 million, right? So, it's a lot. Mary Ann, I see your face, so I'm gonna talk about it for a second. I did a little brainstorming with the manager. Really smart, I'm glad they hired him. Since 2018, before we added the personnel, our overtime was at about 935, somewhere around there, 935.5. Our personnel costs were just over 2 million. Our personnel cost in that same amount of time has gone up 32.3% between adding personnel, adding a rank. Our overtime has only gone up 6.5 in usage. That's actual usage. So in the same, the disparity between the salaries and the overtime is quite big. And I feel as though we're doing a pretty decent, we're going up about less than 1% a year on overtime usage from fiscal 18. So we are doing our best to keep it under wraps. We've had some retirements, we've had some injuries, things like that, deployments. But I feel as though we're doing pretty good this year. We're gonna come in under budget on overtime. And hopefully next year we maintain or reduce slightly. I like when you look at you're not impressed. This is good. This is good stuff. But again, I mean, when you look at what they're going up contractually for salaries, their overtime goes up by 1.5 times what their salary's going up, you know? So I'm, with the number staying pretty much right around that 1,050,000 is what I continue to ask for. The actual usage numbers is going down. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna have overtime. It's just, unfortunately, it's the nature of the beast, but it's, we are doing the best job we can to manage that overtime and make sure that we're spending that money appropriately.
I think the question, I know for me, and I can try and go back in my files, when we were adding the firefighters, the 8 of them in 1 year, and through all the discussions that we had people from Boston come in and explain to us why it was so important to have that number of people. One of the things that I remember distinctly about that was that you had been staffing to 9 people at that point. So as soon as somebody was out, you had to have overtime.
Correct.
And having the 8 officers would get you to 11. But it was my understanding that you weren't going to plan on staffing to 11.
And we don't.
Okay, so what number are you staffing to before you generate? Okay, so you stay at 10 before you generate overtime.
Correct. So we do still have that one-off. And what I'll say is that with the injuries, the deployments, and the retirements that we had, if we were going spot by spot, the overtime be somewhere around $1.8 million.
Right.
So we are seeing the offset on that. And again, we're trying to keep it where it is. When we were up at $1.4 million 1 year, so we're down to $1.05 million. Our best year was fiscal '22, we're at $835,400, was our overtime actual usage. And that was the year that I actually had everybody. And that was, I think I was missing one person that year, I had no deployments, and I had very few injuries. So, you know, unfortunately, you know, firefighting is a contact sport, people get injured. And a lot of times when they get injured, it's not very often, it's a day or two, it's a month, 8 weeks, you know, things like that, sometimes, a lot of times longer. But fiscal '22 was more indicative of what I was expecting, was right around that 8-ish mark. Well, before that, when we talked in 18, it was probably somewhere close to like 750, but due to increases in their contractual
I remember
rates.
when it was around 600.
Yeah, I won't see that, I know that. But I think that's the number that we're kind of trying to get at is the between 8 and 9 number with that one person offset. So we are almost full. I know the deputy is retiring in May, so we will be hiring for that. We have another retirement coming up in May as well, so we're looking to hire for that as well. And we keep people on our reserve list to slow or to reduce the amount of time that it takes to get somebody in the door. Because with the way civil service works, if I go straight from nothing, it takes upwards of 3 months to get someone in the door, just with all the different things we have to do as far as PAT, physical, psych evaluation, signing the list, waiting for everyone to come back, interviews and the whatnot. So with having the reserve list, I can typically, we just did one the other day. Tommy's been great with that. We pull the list, it takes a week. We have the person come in, we've already done a physical, we've already done the PAT, we've done the psych evaluation. So as long as it's within a year, they're right in the door. So this person is 3 weeks and they're on. So
Okay.
they start next week.
What do you currently have out? Like, do you have any deployments?
I have one person who's on deployment until May, end of May, for now. And there's potential for him to get extended. I have another gentleman who's retiring in May as well. I have one who should be back in mid-April. He had a torn bicep. And like I said, I have the deputy going. I have another one who's coming back off injury on the 6th, so that should be, but he was out 6.5 weeks.
So how many do you have out currently? Altogether?
You have
Four.
You have 4 out.
4. Yep, so it's one a shift, which again, that's where we run into the problems. When we have that issue, I'm not filling those 4, which is good.
Right.
But,
But then if
I
somebody
don't-
else gets the flu,
and
or
what
they
we've
take
done.
time,
Right, and we did have the flu run through the place, we had the neurovirus run through the place, and we're in close quarters, so one
Yeah.
person gets it, and we're all guaranteed to have that happy experience together. But what we've done is, we had a couple out on the same shift, and we internally moved people around to try to balance it out, so we weren't just automatically filling on a shift. So we do some things internally to try to reduce the payment of overtime when we can. So if it's a short duration, try not to, because it disrupts people's lives pretty significantly, but if we know it's gonna be a long duration thing, we will make some movement.
okay. Andy?
I have a question, Chief.
Sure.
So I'm thinking about overtime, and I'm thinking about your base cost is going up based off of the union contract, right?
Correct.
Overtime is rate times volume. You don't control rate, right? So the volume is really what we're talking about.
Right.
The volume, which is number of hours or whatever, shifts, whatever you want to call it. Wouldn't it be better if that's what we talk about? Because we can't really control the dollar amount.
But this is the only number we have to work with. So if we're looking at that number and we break it out,
Yeah.
and so Chief had a good point about the increase in the cost per individual that's taken on overtime has been increasing over the years. So that's a good point. But this is the only number that we have.
I
If we
know.
don't have hours that we can look at, or, you know.
though, right?
It is, and maybe that's we're making the same point, which is the cost of the people that are doing the overtime
Right.
is not a controllable.
Right.
Right, and what I can say is this number doesn't appear out of nowhere. I take all the vacation time, all the personal time, the average sick over 3 years, the average injury over 3 years, bereavement time, storm coverage, which we do, and military deployment. So I take all those numbers, I slap them together. If I gave you that actual number, if we filled person for person for those averages, and the already vacation and personal liability that we have, we're actually close to like $1,150,000, and I reduced that anyway. So I'm already reducing on 100,000 to begin with, and then hoping we come in lighter than that, just based on having everybody healthy. So that is one of the things we do try to accomplish. But again, you never know when an injury is going to happen, and that seems to be one of our things, that military and injuries is what happens. And I have a relatively younger workforce at the fire department. All of them are gym people. They go to the gym, they work out, they eat pretty healthy. Some of the old guys come in and like, what are you eating? That's weird. You don't do that. It's a firehouse. But I can say that my workforce in general is relatively healthy and active. So these injuries are legitimate injuries that are happening due to patient movement, equipment movement. None of the stuff we really use is light, and it's awkward, and you know what happens. So
Do firefighters on military deployment continue to draw a salary?
no. So what happens is in the contract.
So that
and
would
that's-
actually create an offset.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So we do have an offset in the firefighter line item. One member hasn't been paid at all. He left last year in February. So the way the contract reads is they get paid for 2 weeks, and they go into an unpaid status. So he hasn't gotten paid since February last year. So we do have an offset in there on his regular. I mean, now it's the problem is
Well,
it's not
time and
apples to apples.
It's time and a half instead of 2.5.
Well, and it's time and a half.
Somebody's out sick, you're paying 2.5 times a
Right,
rate
yeah.
for that one shift, but at least on a deployment, you're only paying 1.5 times.
Yeah, and it's not a straight 1.5, because you could have someone who's got more time on than that person, so it offsets a
Yeah.
little bit more because they're
Plus
a
or
higher
minus.
rate, but, yeah, there is gonna be a surplus in the firefighter line item this year, due to that vacancy. Well, not vacancy, but that deployment. And that'll go, if he does come back in May, which I don't think he's gonna, I think they're gonna extend him, then we would only have the 1 month of his salary that we would pay. Other than that, we wouldn't pay him at all this year.
Are we out of the grant, right, that you got for the
Safer?
firefighters?
Yes.
Yeah, that's gone, right?
Yep.
We get it back.
Sorry about that. They don't do it for existing employees, though, just like, you know.
No.
Yeah, so that, I mean, so, you know, hitting the big thing, which I knew was gonna be the big, you know, talking point, was the overtime, and that's what the overtime is. I wanted to just clue in on that right off the bat, so we can get that out of the way. Other than that, the budget in front of you is very, very much like what you saw last year. The increases on the top portion of the page are contractual. They're all contractual increases. The only difference you're gonna see is in the education incentive pay. So, due to the way the contract went, there was gonna be some, increase in that line item. So what we did is we actually pulled some money out of miscellaneous contractual and just shifted it up. So we're not really, none of the, I call them discretionary accounts, but none of the actual like operating accounts themselves have changed except for that one, and that money just slid to the top under a contractual line item. So that's the only change in that. And then we put in some money in furnishings for it's right here, mobile repeaters in the vehicles. So the deputy has done a great job getting what's called a bidirectional amplifier in buildings in town. We have a lot of buildings that have a lot of steel in them, they have a lot of machinery in them, so that causes issues with the RF signals from the radios on both police and fire. So what we looked at was having those systems put in. Some of them we can push the issue and make them do it by code. Some of them are, hey, would you be a good neighbor type of deal, but they're expensive. So this is a good way for us to put a couple of those in our vehicles, so in the engines, in the ladder or the tower, and have them outside, so you get a better chance of getting those dead areas fixed while the call's going on, and then as you leave, that's what it is. And once we buy them, we own them, and that's it. So that 20,000 is for, excuse me, is for the purchase and installation of those.
Okay. So I was looking at your stats. A lot of them are pretty much consistent with the previous year.
Yep.
A few up, a few down.
Yeah, we're down about 100 runs for calls for service over the last year.
Yeah.
And we do. We saw a pretty significant jump last year in call volume, and then it kind of leveled out a little bit, which you do see that here and there. You do see certain years where it'll
Yeah.
jump, and then it'll kind of either remain the same or be within the same bracket. Wilmington is, it's consistent. It's actually usually consistently growing, but this year we had a little bit of a reduction on some stuff.
So I'm looking at overdoses for a 4-year span. And in 2021, we had 66 for the year. 22 and 23, it's been down to like 17 and 16.
Correct.
Did that number stay true for 24?
I believe it did, yeah. And overdoses, so one of the things, Chief McClellan put this in way back when. We used to just report on fire activity, we didn't really report on medical except for that we went. He put these in because the fire numbers, as we all know, kind of have dwindled in a lot of cases for what they used to report on in the 80s and 90s. Those overdoses aren't just what you would think of like nefarious drugs or illicit drugs. Those can be anything from I think I took too much prescription medication, or, we've had people, I took 15 Tylenol. So it's not all your opioids or anything like that. They could actually be just a mistake in taking prescription drugs as well. So in 21, we saw an uptick, and if the police chief was here, I would ask him, because he'd have probably a better idea, because they're the ones who investigate.
He's right behind you.
Oh, you are still here. Look at that. I thought he left. In 21, we saw a lot of people post-COVID, losing jobs, having some serious financial difficulties. And when they're in those types of situations, a lot of people revert back to or go to substance usage. And I think that's where we saw that uptick in 21.
The numbers can be deceiving, though, the drop, because it's so prevalent with Narcan out there. So people are, they're coming back from the ODs with the Narcan, so it's not being reported, but it was an OD. So that's, it's good news, but it's a mixed.
So you're talking about something happening in a home that people have Narcan in the home,
Family.
knowing that there may be a need for it.
Friend or family member who,
Yeah.
sort of takes responsibility while they're doing
You
it.
can buy Narcan at CVS.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, in 21, it was very widely available. The state was handing it out. I mean, it was, but we saw an uptick that year. I think a lot of it was due to some financial and probably some, social issues that were going on with people post-COVID, and then it seemed to settle back in, so.
Good.
Similarly, on the psych evals are just like,
Through the roof.
well, they're low. I mean, there's like none of them. But that doesn't reflect, I mean, you only reported 21 in
Yeah, so-
2023. And that does not reflect what's going on in our community. So how have we changed the way we're responding to these? Have we changed the way we're classifying them? I mean,
So-
because that's not what's going on in
Yeah, there's
any of our
both.
communities.
So there's both. So psychological evaluations are just that. They call like, hey, I think we need to look at this person. But there's a lot that Samantha and the recovery team do,
So
that
that's-
they go out, we never even talk to them.
Yep.
We don't even see them because she's either worked them in with a provider or got in touch with their provider or goes through advocates, and we never have to talk to them, or they're already what we would call section 12, we're gonna take them anyway, so that's not an evaluation at that point. That's a section 12 transport where they're ordered to the hospital by medical professional, police officer, or social worker. So there has been adjustments in how that whole system works. A lot of times, like I said, we don't go, we don't have to, which is fine. So the psychological evaluation, and I was actually looking at these when I did it this year, and I'm like, I kinda wanna change that whole thing because it's not indicative of what we do. When Chief McClellan did them in 2015, these were the very hot button things that we were going to a lot, and that's why he put them in there. So just by the nature and how we report to this committee, to the select board, we just continue to do it, because we didn't want to just strip out things that they'd seen in the past if they pulled up their paperwork from the year before.
Well, how would you change it? Just to eliminate some things, or to totally renovate what you're reporting?
I'd probably like to renovate the way we
Mine's a more
report it.
accurate metrics.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so, because looking at this, like, you guys are pointing out the overdoses and the psych evals are really low, so it's like, oh, we have good things going on in town, and we do, but it's not like they're disappearing, because they're not. There's all these things going on, the overdoses, not just the Narcan, but again, the recovery unit with the police department, they do a lot more of the social outreach stuff. It's shifted from these people are in trouble to more, these people need help, and it's a totally different way of handling that situation than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you walked in a house, someone was doing heroin, they wound up in handcuffs, and that was that, and it was an arrest. It may not be that way now, just due to what their history is and what's going on and things like that. So I think just to, like the manager said, get a better metric on what we're actually doing, so it seems, it's more indicative of how we operate.
I actually would like to see how many fires you're dealing with.
Okay.
Because number of runs, I mean, I'm assuming that incorporates everything on this page. So, often not you, but I could be talking to somebody and they'll be talking about the fire department and, oh, there's no fires in town. No, maybe there aren't as many, but, you do a service that is just enormous with the medical and so on. So, I don't know, maybe if you could put fires in there, that might be
Yep.
something to
Sure.
focus on.
And maybe some of these mental health issues, psych evals or whatever we call them, maybe that would shift over to the police department,
Yeah.
because a lot of that, I assume, is being handled by your substance abuse coordinator, and who may be the first responder in those situations now. So that responsibility, I don't know who, how you dispatch those calls, but I assume you're sharing them more than you used to before you had a substance abuse coordinator.
Absolutely. Our records show we had 500 mental health related calls last year.
Yeah. That tells a little different story
Yeah.
than 12,
Yeah.
or whatever the number is.
And
So,
that's
and I think part of this is to educate us, but also to educate the public about
Yeah.
why these departments are necessary, and why, in the services, this is basically, not an informational document to tell taxpayers how their tax money is being spent and why it's being necessary. And, 500 mental health calls, that's 1.5 or 1.25 a day.
Yeah.
It's definitely the evolution of public safety in general. Things that, like we said, used to be straight arrests or, summonses to court aren't anymore. There's a lot more social work that's going into policing now than
Absolutely.
there probably used to be.
So, I mean, I wouldn't mind you folks kind of putting all your heads together and saying, how can we
Yeah.
tell
I think that
the
would be
story
great.
of public safety in the year 2024?
Yeah.
If you've
So,
been-
I mean, even if you wanted to keep the psych eval or the mental health calls that the police receive, it could just be a notation on here that
Yeah.
These are handled by the police department.
Yeah, we can come up
You
with
know, if-
something that's better indicative
But
of how we
however you
operate.
think, and also chest pains and difficulty breathing, they can kind of go together. They sound pretty similar, right?
Sometimes not.
Well, they're different than a fall.
They're different than a fall. A lot of times you get chest pain with diff breathing. Sometimes you get just difficulty breathing. Sometimes people just get chest pain. I mean, there's so many different metrics to look at those. But like I said, we can revamp this. This is a document that was adjusted 10 years ago, and it could use an overhaul.
Well, just so the committee knows, the reevaluation of the metrics for all the departments is something that's on my list for next year. I did want to try to tackle it in my first budget.
Yeah.
We'll let them just run the same goals.
I want to see how it works, right?
Yeah.
I would actually think that you could, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, you first.
I was just gonna say, you could probably collaborate with the Board of Health on that too, right?
Yeah, good
terms-
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do a lot with Shelley in the Board of Health. We all kind of work together, the three of us, so.
I did have one question for you, Chief.
Sure.
Anthony Nelson, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
New to the board, been in Wilmington for 6 years, in March. It's okay if the answer is no. Does the fire department track any kind of a estimated cost for a false alarm?
We don't. So we've talked about this before. In order to charge for false alarms, we have to have that, it's in the bylaws to do it. We don't get many of them. The deputy and my fire prevention bureau typically will follow up on every
Right.
commercial fire alarm that comes in. So the number of nuisance alarms that we get repeatedly have gone down quite a bit.
Okay.
So we don't get, the constant same issue at a building. It's typically fixed rather quickly.
Okay.
So he's on top of it, and my fire prevention lieutenant is also. They both follow up on all of that stuff every day.
The reason I ask is it may just be anecdotal. I live very close to that Woburn Concord four-way busy intersection, and I see the engines fly through there all the time. And of course, you have to approach every 4,977 like it's a legitimate call. You can't assume differently. And I just, I'm not talking the people who you would have one or two a year accidental. Those things happen, but I'm talking habitual. I could just be a baseless rumor. I heard of a specific business that I won't name that has repetitive false alarm calls in that area, and I was curious if there's additional cost to spin the engine up to get it out, and then you do that same call 5 times a month. Is that costing the taxpayer money?
Well, I could say that if there's a business in town that's having the legitimate, so the thing is if you go to a place and right now we get snow melt, so if there's a device getting water on it, it's not really a false alarm. It's the system doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's just the system is reacting to water, not fire, because it's being shorted out. That could be a problem. Most of what I think you're trying to tell me, or trying to get across to me is like, the panel is a mess. There's some sort of issue inside the panel.
I
And they're
actually wouldn't even know
refusing-
why.
Yeah, they're refusing to fix the problem that we're identifying when we go out there, and it continues to come in. Those ones, believe me, they don't want to see the deputy coming. He's rough.
Got it.
He can be real rough, and they do not want him there. Because he'll go through and he'll ticket for fire code violations and all that stuff. So he's, like I said, he does a phenomenal job at following up on those things and squaring those issues away relatively quickly.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, so I listened to the scanner. Kudos to the dispatches. Man, they are so professional. They're great. I do notice that, like your Care One, your Venia Care, a lot of calls. A lot of calls.
Yes.
I guess my question is, do other municipalities that have a lot of assisted livings, do they have any sort of contracts with firefighter for runs or anything like that? I mean, we are, I mean, you guys are constantly going there to these places.
So 9092 West Street, 750 Woburn Street, and 500 Salem Street. The first three are all assisted livings and/or nursing homes, rehabilitation centers, and the last one is Winchester Family Medical Center. And we do go to all of them very frequently. So what is supposed to happen is they're supposed to have contracts with private ambulance companies to do their, what we would call transfers. And what a transfer is, it's not an acute medical issue, but it is something that they need to go to the doctor, like actual hospital to see, because either the inside medical staff, doctor, nurses can't handle what they have going on, or they're not available because it's overnight, or whatever the case may be. But what has happened since COVID, and I've discussed this with some of you before, is the private EMS system is decimated. They're kind of coming back a little bit, but they're nowhere near where they were 5 or 10, well, I'd say 7 to 10 years ago. The trucks aren't available. They don't have them. Sometimes they'll call their company that they're contracted with, and it's a 12-hour wait or a 14, 24-hour wait for a truck. They can't get a truck there. So what'll happen is they all have their own protocols, and they'll say, well, it's been 6 hours, 7 hours, we can't get anyone, we'll call 911, and we'll get them picked up. Sometimes that happens through the facility. Sometimes it happens through that private ambulance company. They take it upon themselves to call us because they know we're 911 and we cannot, by statute, refuse the call. So we go and we bring them to the emergency room, and we do our job. When I know that it's egregious, they get a call from me, and so does that ambulance company, and that's not a good day for them. But at the end of the day, my people are still getting stuck with that call. So, we've worked with DPH, we've worked with all the facilities. At the end of the day, they're stuck as much as we are stuck. They don't have an ambulance to come take anyone out, and the way I look at it, as much as it is a nuisance, so to speak, because it's really not a 911 call. It's never a nuisance to go help somebody, but it's a nuisance because they should have that contract available to pick this patient up. I wouldn't want my grandmother or my grandfather, anyone sitting there in discomfort and pain because someone can't get their business squared away. So if we gotta go pick them up, bring them to the hospital so they can get picked up, fixed up and comfortable, then that's what we do. So it is frustrating, but at the end of the day, it's the job, and that's what we have to do. So
do you bill the healthcare facility, or do you bill the
it
patient?
gets billed through insurance, just like we would bill anybody else.
So if that person doesn't have insurance, can you go to like?
They all have,
Care
they all either
One?
have Medicaid or Medicare, and you get the
Whatever the rate is.
$200 or whatever the rate is, and that's it. That's what you get. So, I mean, we've discussed.
Which is the same amount you'd get if you transported them from home.
So if you're private insurance, no, because we actually have contracted rates that are a little bit higher.
But the elderly, anybody on Medicaid.
Yeah, if they're on
the
Medicaid,
rate's
yeah,
the same.
that's what you're getting.
Yeah.
That's just what it is, and the state that's what they're gonna give you, so. But yeah, the private pay EMS, or insurance person is gonna pay at a higher rate, because of their contracted rates with their insurance companies, but, for your Medicaid patients, you're not getting much. We actually looked at it to potentially, approach the manager and put up another truck just to do those, transfers, really, with those medical facilities during the day. But the way I look at it, from a dollars and cents perspective is, if I take all Medicaid patients,
Not gonna-
it's
gonna be a
a
loss.
deficit.
Yeah.
It's a deficit, and it's not worth it, so it wasn't worth approaching. After I looked at all the numbers, it wasn't something I wanted to venture into.
Okay, thank you.
Do you or Chief Desmond, I forgot to ask you this as well, have any calls to not the rehab, the detox?
We do. Yeah, we get calls there. Both of us do. Mine are obviously of a different nature than his. What happens with the detox, and they've actually been very receptive to what we tell them. Actually, their government liaison is Derek Fullerton. He grew up in town. He was the Board of Health Director in Middleton for a long time, and he is excellent about reaching out to us, especially if there's an issue. But a lot of times what they wind up with in there is we've had some seizures, we've had some people that they won't even take in because they're too intoxicated or too under the influence. And even though they're so we brought this up, we have an annual meeting actually next week with them. They brought up the fact that they are a medical detox, but there's limits to their abilities there, right? So they can give certain medications to help with the withdrawals and those types of effects, but they're not going to take in somebody who's so highly intoxicated that they're going to be dangerous to themselves. So they'll refuse them at the door, and if they don't have an Uber or something, they'll call us. A lot of times because that person doesn't want to leave or whatever the case may be. I know, just and not speaking with the chief, but they get called down there here and there for unruly people who don't want to leave, like that have been refused service. But I'd say they're significantly better than they were when they first come out.
Yeah, I would concur with that. We don't, it's not a significant number of calls there. There was a lot of concern when it first, came on board that we've been going a lot, and it's really not a big draw for us, no.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's a pretty quiet
They're-
organization.
They're good neighbors.
Yeah.
They have been with us anyway. Like I said, they bring in, they talk a lot with us. They brought in Ted Johnson a couple weeks ago, because he does a lot of first responder outreach for mental health within ourselves, and that was a great little get together for some of our police officers, firefighters, and the dispatchers that were available. So they are a good neighbor, and like I said, when I call Derek about anything going on there, he usually gets an answer to us pretty quick. So it's nice to have a familiar face that you can tap into, because in the beginning we didn't, and it was a little tough in the beginning. We had some growing pains, but it's much better now.
Good. Any other questions regarding the budget? Are we ready to move to capital? Okay. It's page 74.
So what we're looking for this year is, on my 5-year plan, I had a replacement for engine 3. Engine 3 is a 2013 E1. When it was purchased with a different system than what we're typically seeing. So our typical trucks have a water tank and they have a foam tank on them, and that's it. You get 750 gallons of water, you get like 30 gallons of foam, or whatever the case may be. Engine 3 was bought as what's called compressed air foam system, CAFS for short. It's a smaller tank and it's got a bigger foam cell. And what happens is, through the pump, there's also an air compressor, and that essentially will mix your water and your foam together. It's a specific foam you can use, and it gives you 3 times the water volume for knockdown power. Now, the problem with that is, when foam is not indicated, you only have, this truck has 480 gallon tank, but it actually knocks down at 370. So we're using about half the water than we would normally have to do an attack on a structure or a vehicle or something like that. The other problem with this truck is, because of that reduced water, when you lay a feeder line in the street, that big yellow line, it barely fills up like a 100-foot section of that line, and then it's nothing. So I can't even send the tank water to another truck if they need it, if I hit a dead hydrant. So I'm not a fan of this truck. I don't like it.
We got that.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of it. I was here when it was brand new, as a firefighter when it was brand new. There were a lot of issues with it. I just felt it was a poor purchase. But it is what it is. I have the truck. So I was always gonna get rid of that truck. I didn't like it. Engine 5 we picked up when the squad had its issue, and we bought engine 1 because you guys gave us the money midstream on that. We were looking for that 4th pump as a reserve piece, so we had another pump. That's a 1995 KME Renegade that we got out of Valley Cottage, New York, through Bulldog Fire Apparatus. It's a great truck, phenomenal. It's simple. The mechanics love it because it's easy. It's got almost no computers on it, which is great. The problem arises with that truck is the ISO rating. After 30 years, ISO they'll give you reduced points or not count apparatus due to age. So that's a problem for us. We don't really want that going up. So I talked to the manager, I said, look, I'd really rather replace that truck. And I talked to a couple of different fire apparatus places in the area about doing a refurb, midlife refurb, kind of like what we did on the tower unit, in making Engine 3 a more viable vehicle for us. So the number that I have in my capital for Engine 3 would remove the compressed air foam system, add a separate tank. I would not go with foam on the truck at all due to all the EPA restrictions now with foam usage and PFAS. So we would keep foam on the truck, probably in buckets, and use it what we call an inline eductor. So it's the bucket comes off the truck, pop it in the bucket, pulls it down the line if you need it. Our other trucks still have foam, so honestly, if we needed it, we could use one of those too. It would check the needle scale the frame rails, repaint them, undercoat it, do a clean up some of the body. It's not rust because it's aluminum, but the electrolysis that's going on with the truck from the dissimilar metals and the salt over time. So basically be like a facelift on that truck again, but that would push that truck out quite a bit. Otherwise, it sits. It's the backup to the backup. I use that after I use the 1996. My guys hate me for it because they want the other truck. It drives nice, but at the end of the day, my argument is I have 800 gallons of water here if I need it, or I have 370. I'm gonna go with more water in the heavier truck because that's safer, in my estimation, for them. So that's why I do that. I think this would be a good option for us. And then, obviously, you see the other numbers. I changed out Engine 3's replacement with Engine 5's replacement. So we will replace Engine 5. So that's the swap. It was Engine 3 on your list for the last couple of years, and like I said, with the manager, we discussed it, and we just changed an Engine 3 to Engine 5. So that's those two numbers. Any questions on those trucks?
How long for you to get back that truck after you do the repairs? How
Engine
long
3?
is- Yes.
So Engine 3, if it's approved, I would expect like a 4 to 6 month
Okay.
turnaround on it. And that would be dependent on who we choose as a vendor to do the job. We'd have to get quotes for that because I don't believe there's any bid list for like refurbs, unless that's changed. Last time with the tower, it didn't. I had to get quotes. And then it would be the backup in the shop, like and we would put that as part of our RFP as a grading criteria is, can you get the truck and deliver it back within X amount of days, something like that. So I'd estimate 4 to 6 months. The tower took us like 7, I think, and that's a much bigger,
Right.
more involved vehicle. So I'd hope this would be a little bit easier, a little bit less of a lead time on it.
So you're looking at 3 to 4 years from the time you place the order for E5?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that's why, so that kind of puts me a little further down, where I have the tower showing up on your capital. That truck, I expect to keep till 2035-ish. But in order, you can look at my capital plan with a big asterisk on it, based on lead times. I mean, they used to get cruisers in 4 months. It's
Right.
taken them a year, and those are Ford Explorers. They're blowing them off the line left and right. These are all custom-built trucks. It's right now taking 30 to 36 months for ambulances, which is why you're seeing 2 ambulances in there, and we don't even have the 2 that I already got approved, because they're taking 3 years to come in. So by the time we get both these trucks, they'll be ready to get replaced, because right now, our 2 ambulances have 180 and 170,000 miles respectively on them. It's insane.
Those are hard miles.
Those are hard miles. They're really hard miles. I'll echo the chief's sentiments, the DPW, those mechanics are, those four guys are phenomenal. They're magicians. The stuff they are able to resurrect on those things is unreal. They are awesome. I can't say enough good things about Mike and the gang down there. They're really good. But, again, everything has a shelf life, you know, and in that truck, we used to have a state inspector for OEMS that would say, I take the mileage on a truck and I multiply it by 3, and that gives me the actual mileage, because these are diesels. They get in them, they drive them fast, they drive them hard, they don't let them warm up, they don't let them cool down, they just shut them off, they turn them right back on. So it beats those motors up pretty good. So we've never had trucks with that many miles on them here. Our typical ambulances are about 90 to 100,000 in the front, another probably 30 or so in the back, and then they're gone. 120, 130, they're out the door.
Right.
We're well over that, and I'm A1 that we ordered 2 years ago is due in August. A2, which we approved last year, is due in the first quarter of '27.
Where does the pumper come from? What kind, is it made in the USA?
Yes.
Is it, okay, so
Yep,
it's
all of our
USA.
trucks are made in the United States. Yep.
Can I ask, how does that work? You pay for them now? Okay, so you ask for the funds now,
Right.
and then you wait 4 years to spend the funds?
So, yeah, unfortunately, that's what happens with capital. So when we ask, so in this process, I'll call a couple of vendors that I've worked with and kind of get the ballpark on. And I'll get a number, and I'll say, look, give me that number for 4 years. I need it 4 years out. I don't need it for today because that number's not gonna work. So they'll give me that number with 4 years. They're just kind of forecasting that out. So once it gets approved, like the ambulance numbers, those just carry on my balance sheet until those trucks come in. So the money that we got for A1 2 years ago is still sitting. It just continues to show for us, and then A2 just will continue to show, and capital will automatically carry in the budget. We don't need any special request to carry those. So those will just continue to carry until that capital item is satisfied.
Just for procurement purposes, we're not allowed to pay for items we don't receive. So we couldn't pay for those in advance. All the ambulance companies that make these, and fire companies, they know that.
Yep.
We put in the order, but we can't officially log in the order until it's voted on. So even though we know that it's gonna take 4 years, we can't put in the order until we have the money, but then we don't spend the money until we get them, so it's.
It was a little bit of a stupid question.
No, it's a good
I think for the
question.
people at home, it's not.
Yeah.
It's an excellent question.
Because
Yeah.
I was just trying to match it up, and I'm thinking, well, how does this work with such a long lead time? Like, that just seems, you're
Therefore,
carrying a lot of money on your balance sheet then.
yeah, they're forecasting the number for us. One of the things that's gone away, for the most part, there were a lot of fire departments losing trucks because the manufacturer would come back and say, yeah, well, you signed that in 2020, but everything's gone up, so come up with another 150 grand, you got a month, and if you can't, then we're gonna sell it to someone else.
Who will pay?
And they would. They'd have trucks almost all the way done, kind of hold it hostage, and then when you couldn't get your municipality to pony up the dough, they'd just sell it out for money, they didn't care. And they put
2 month
those,
lead time,
they wouldn't, yeah, they wouldn't
Yeah.
care. So,
jump the line.
And to pony off that, with the expected tariffs, right? Is this a realistic number at this point?
it should be, but obviously all those things came in after the fact, because I had this was done in November. So these numbers could adjust slightly, they could adjust
Slightly,
a
could
little
be,
more. It all depends on where they procure their raw materials from.
More
So-
than likely, it would be from a tariff country, because that's where mostly all the
Potentially,
raw
yeah.
materials come from.
Also, keep in mind, this pumper's not gonna start being built. They're not like they start building and now it takes them 4 years to build it. This pumper's not gonna be built for 3 years.
Yeah.
So the company's just making a good faith effort, as much as we are, to try to estimate what the reality's gonna be like in this 3 years.
So does that mean that there just aren't that many manufacturers? And there's backlog, and that's why it takes that period
So-
of time, or?
I can speak for it from a multi-municipal standpoint, which is around COVID, when the supply chain issues happened, I mean, it wasn't great before COVID, but post-COVID, after supply chain issues, manufacturers had been operating on these like schedules of, I get everything at the exact time I need it, I don't hold anything in reserve, so I don't keep extra parts for this equipment, we're all super, they had everything down to a fine detail, so that they weren't having to hold materials, because that's wasted money, according to them. When the supply chain issues got screwed up, what happened was, you could have all the materials for the truck except for the chip you needed from Indonesia, and those are a 6-month delay, and so the lines all just shut down, and that meant every line for every municipal vehicle, but especially these one-off trucks that are being hand-built, they just stopped. And they couldn't fill the orders that they were due the year of COVID or the next year, and then everything just kind of snowballed. And they haven't recovered from it in timeline. There are very few companies that do it. It's not like you're buying a sedan where you can go out and there are 20 companies that can sell you a sedan. There's how many do you think? What, 6 or 7?
So, and to jump onto that, there are 6 or 7 that build them, but there's like 4 of them that are owned by the same group. Rev Group bought up Pierce, they bought up KME, they bought up E1, I believe they bought up Rosenbauer and Ferrara, so like, they have a huge market share, and I believe they're being investigated at this point for creating a monopoly, because it's starting to gain some traction that this one investment group has bought up the larger market share of fire apparatus manufacturing, and they're driving prices. So it's becoming a problem. I think the only ones that are still independent are Seagrave and Fouts Brothers in Midwest. I think that's it. But the rest of them they're all owned by the big guy. And Seagrave's they're a beautiful truck, but that same truck, if I want to order, it's $1.2 million.
Yeah, they're really expensive.
So they're super, super expensive.
We bought an ambulance when I worked in Townsend, and it was whatever the price was for the ambulance in the contract, but they put this language in the contract that says, subject to potential increase of X% based on market conditions at time of delivery. And so they called up before and said, pursuant to your contract, that $750,000 has just become $810. Do you have the extra 60 for us?
Mm-hmm.
I thought Axon was bad.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but they're open in the contract, that you can't get a contract that doesn't say that, so.
Right. Yeah, they don't. I tried to push it out in the last ambulance, and they wouldn't take it out. They would leave. They said, no, we're leaving it, because if it goes up, you're paying it. So
It's probably in this one too.
likely, like the manager said, it's pretty much in all of them now. So there's that. So you get the 2 trucks, I got the ambulances in there, and that's why they're in there. And again, like I said, big asterisks, if somehow the supply chain fixes itself and they're starting to turn ambulances again in 12 to 18 months and fire trucks in 24 months, we can revisit this and slide some things down the line. We won't have to order them so early. But at this point in time, I'm doing that as trying to watch the life cycle of the vehicles. And, like I said, the Tower Pro, you wouldn't have seen that until like 2032. But I gotta put it in early now, because those are 4 to 5 year builds now.
Okay, do you want to talk about the substation?
We can do that. So last year we had 630,000 for feasibility and the whatnot. So that actually is coming back this week. The RFP for that. RFQ. What is it? PQ, Tommy.
RFP.
Thank you. So Tommy put that out. That should be coming back this week to get graded, and then we'll choose a company for that. And the manager, we had discussions about it, and he found a lot that we already own. that seems to look like it's gonna work. So you put in, money for the initial, architecturals, perk tests, site work, things like that, and then by the time we come back here next year, we'll have a solid finish-up number, to request to finish that project.
So I think that you had mentioned that you wanted to be able to announce that that was a chosen site when we get to town meeting.
Hopefully we get to town meeting, so there is another town board, and I don't wanna look like we're unduly putting pressure on them. They have to make a determination as to whether or not they feel like they can release some land. So that's on their radar, but
Okay.
Our goal with this is the down payment on the construction costs for the substation. It's coming from free cash, it is not debt, we're not borrowing for this $3.5 million. That is not the full cost for the substation, I don't think anybody thought it was going to be, but just in case anybody in the public thought that was the cost. Now, that's the first payment, basically, towards the substation costs. I didn't wanna try to put it all in one year, because I do think that if we, we're gonna spend FY '26 doing, full design, getting, site control, doing our design feasibility, doing our perk tests, and then, we can, with the 3.5 million, start to do site work on the site, anticipation of coming back to town meeting in May of '26 for, the remaining amount of construction costs, and by that time, we should have it, nailed down with the architect, with the anticipation of starting construction, in June of 2026. This is basically the land we found. It's a piece of town-owned property, was bought in 1990 with 1 acre set aside reserved for a future fire substation. So the town's been thinking about this for a long time. Only 35 years. So this is, I think, we've reached the point where we actually need to.
So when would you bring on an OPM and,
We're gonna put out the OPM next month.
oh, good, okay.
The feasibility study I'm not sure whether or not it'll be completed by town meeting, completely completed by town meeting, but shortly after the feasibility study, obviously, we'll put out for an architect. We need to have an OPM on board for the architect. And then they'll do the design, and I'm hopeful that we'll have some renderings or some basic, like, site layout if the site that we're hoping for comes to fruition.
So I just want to ask you, Chief, I know we've talked about different locations in that general area, and for different reasons you did not like them, mostly maneuverability for your equipment, things like that. Are you happy with this site? Are you content with it?
I am, and obviously without, like the manager said, kind of letting the cat out of the bag, I think he's done some good work with the neighbors, discussing things, and this site was looked at in the beginning, and it was just a resounding no. And now it's not. So,
Okay.
whatever voodoo he's
Mystery.
pulling seems to be working out, but no, I think this is a really good option for us.
Great. So I'm looking forward to when you can definitively announce to the public, so that,
It may be by the 18th.
okay, that'd be awesome, because if we're looking for OPMs and architects and things like that, I'd feel a lot more comfortable knowing that we have secured that property,
Me too.
so. And you-
So, 2 questions. One, will this construction project or whatever be run by the permanent building committee? Is that the plan, or
So
how does that
I
work?
sat down, I had a quick conversation with George Huber and Dennis Kelly. about arranging a meeting of the permanent building committee in March to have a discussion with them. And this is very different from a senior center or a school or a town hall in that, you know, we need a functional building. I'm not looking to win any design awards or, have this turn into a Taj Mahal or anything. So I think that the permanent building committee alone, or a representative of the permanent building committee with some folks from fire and the town manager's office, will kind of run that project. But I don't anticipate a separate building committee for this like we have for the senior center or the.
My other question is, the feasibility study we're just about to get RFPs, proposals back, did that include a request to analyze staffing needs that a fire substation will require, independent of what would come from our staff? Or are we gonna be relying on our, if any, changes in the number of firefighters you need per shift across the town? Will it change, will it not change, et cetera? I'm kind of new to, I've been on the finance committee when this substation business was talked about. So I think it's important for us to kind of start getting our head around what, how many, will we need more firefighters in the FY '27 budget? Will we need another captain in the FY, whatever, the staffing plan? So will that be, is that part of the RFP, the feasibility study, or is that something that will be developed in?
So, that's a very good question. In conversations with the chief, the anticipation of this substation is, at this time, it's gonna be run with existing staff. So there's no planned increase in staff to run the substation. That being said, part of the feasibility study is to evaluate the future needs of of Wilmington, and especially the area under the coverage of the substation, to make sure that we're building a substation to handle the future needs of the town. So to the extent that that addresses apparatus, that will necessarily come back and say, well, if they think we need 2 engines and an ambulance running out of here, and we only have 1 engine and an ambulance running out of here, we're gonna have more people. So that, that's.
Or more equipment.
Yeah, and so the feasibility study is gonna try to identify, the sizing we're gonna need to right size it for a long-term plan for North Wilmington. And that, that long-term plan will, at least for that substation, take a look at staffing. Only because it's gonna look at the needs for the apparatus and the needs for coverage of the.
Thank you.
So I have the same concerns about staffing, but I also am picking up on what you're saying about being able to grow with the community's needs, because we don't know in 15 or 20 years what our equipment needs are going to be there. So my feeling is build for the future. Don't plan on staffing anybody new, but have the flexibility there so that when we do have to add equipment, it's not a problem. We're not having equipment sitting outside.
And that's what the chief and I have absolutely
Right.
talked about, is.
And
so-
it's a lot cheaper to do that now
Yes.
than to try to add on to a building in
Yeah.
20 years.
So if for instance, if we need 3 bays now, 2 bays for active, 1 bay for a reserve, piece of reserve equipment, then we probably should look at building 4 bays so that we have an extra bay to allow us to expansion. Or if it says 4, we should probably build 5. I mean, that's, we should make sure that, as you say, we're building for what Wilmington's gonna look like in 2050. So that we don't have to worry about it. We also have to understand that, like, God forbid something happens to the public safety building, fire and at least fire is gonna be needed to operate out of this substation. And so, that we need to be realistic about having that as an option, so that the chief can fight citywide from this structure. And so that's the other thing.
Are we also having a space for police Is there,
Do I have to? No, yes.
I thought we spoke
That's-
about that
That's,
briefly.
that's always been the plan,
Okay.
to put something up
Put
there
a
to
cruiser up
be able to
there
have
in
a
space.
sector car up there with the Sally port and a restroom, a little kitchenette, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd be, looking at any sort of cells or any of that stuff, but at least, report writing area and a Sally port and
Part of
some
the
area for
feasibility
them.
study is gonna be to interface
Yeah.
with police to try to determine the needs of them,
Mm-hmm.
of their, in that section, cause now's the time to do it.
Because,
And, that would be.
yeah, we know that storage has always been an issue, as they've grown and we've grown. Storage is an issue, so with them having some space up there, potentially a few offices as well. We're gonna look at all that.
Okay. Go ahead.
So it's kind of, the way I'm interpreting this, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of a binomial decision. Either this mystery property is good and the 3.5 is good, or by the 18th we'll know it's not good. And then I'm assuming that 3.5 changes, right? Or it's not even in,
Well, so this is, that's another good question. So this is kind of our number one priority for properties that we're pursuing. It's not the only property that we are pursuing. Unfortunately, we don't own the other properties.
that's
that-
what I meant. So there's a zero cost if we own it now. Well, an opportunity cost, but there's a zero cost
Yeah.
baked into this 3.5.
Right, and so, if we find out that there's, that this property is not gonna work, at whatever stage, even if we get site control, but they find it doesn't perk, or, there's something that makes it prohibitively expensive to work with the topography. We do have backup plans, that would still work in this timeline. That's one of the reasons why we get the $3.5 million now, but we're not talking about starting construction for a whole other year. So we have the opportunity to move to site B, and get site control in time to do all the work to come back and still have the substation constructed at the same time.
And given the fact that this is from free cash as opposed to raising it from taxation, the
Or
impact
debt.
on the taxpayer or debt is not, there's no impact.
Correct, either the
It's
3.5
actually-
million sits in free cash, or it sits in a
It
capital.
sits in the capital.
the capital line, just like we
waiting to
talked
be
about.
spent if it takes, it takes another year to work out the land.
Yes, and so that's one of the benefits of
Is it-
doing this, is we're not, if this was debt, I'd be less inclined to take on debt,
Or an appropriation in general.
but I would probably still propose it, because I think it's gonna work. But at this time, because it's free cash, it's really, moving from one bucket to another bucket and holding it there, so that when we need to spend it, we don't have to go back to town meeting to spend it, we've already got that capital appropriation.
So we talked about the apparatus that we potentially could have there. Currently with our ambulances, I believe we do like one's the front line and then we switch like every couple of weeks, right? Or that's what we try to do.
We try, yeah.
Yeah. So if we then have, and this might be too far down the line, it might be after we have, the feasibility, everything done with that. But if we have an ambulance at both locations, they're both kind of front line then, and with a 3-year lead time, are we looking that we might need to purchase another ambulance to kind of like have, as those ones start to phase out, at least have another one there?
So we've discussed that with Mike at the DPW. Right now, once we, get our other ambulance in August, there's potential that we hold on to one, and have 3 floating around, just in case we've had accidents, we can
Yeah.
have breakdowns, things like that. So there's potential, I'm not saying we're 100% going to, but there's potential to keep one. Well, we keep the one that we're gonna replace for now. And then the other thing you gotta look at is when you have 2 running simultaneously like that, you're gonna drop some wear on them, right? So you're not gonna build those miles as fast. So potentially we'll have a little bit more lead time between having to purchase new ones. So that could help, and that would ultimately give us like an extra, a reserve truck, so to
Yeah.
speak. So when we, like right now, DPW takes a monthly for maintenance and things like that. So if, if they have to take them for maintenance, perfect. It doesn't disrupt the operations. The other truck goes in service, and we run it for the day or 2 days or whatever it is. So we've thought of figuring out how to expand
Yeah.
the fleet that way without having to potentially buy a third
Right.
brand-new truck.
Thank you.
Can I say something to Joe before you leave?
Sure.
Joe, I just want to thank you. I know you're retiring, but I just want to thank you for all your hard work.
Yes,
Yes,
thank you very much.
thank you.
Give all the support.
What are your plans after retirement?
I'll take it day by day. Not working is the first plan.
Yeah. And when is the official date?
September 4th.
Oh.
So I got a while. I'll be around.
Okay, good.
No.
Last National Night Out, one last 4th of July.
It's gonna come a lot faster than
Yeah,
I
I
think.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
gonna sneak up on us.
Well, thank you
Thank you, Chief.
very much. Do we want to go to dispatch?
Yes,
Are
we
we
can
ready
do that.
to move that? And this is on page 36.
Teresa, you are on fire tonight. These pages.
Hey, if I have time, I can get this organized before I get in here.
So dispatch, contractual increases, for the most part are, again, I use it lightly, but the discretionary, the operational line items are all, relatively the same. Mary Ann, I'd like to draw your attention to the overtime line item. It is reduced by 18,000, which, not a huge number, but at the end of the day, it's a reduction. And the big-
10%.
The big reason for that reduction is, we're filling up. I got one spot that I'm still, and we're in the process of hiring that person. So right now, we technically have 2 openings. One of them is, just finished some of the pre-employment stuff today. So I'll be, looking at, working with the manager to get that person started soon. They'll be on training for a little while, but that would give us, at least all of our shifts filled, which is good. That gives us a little bit of room on each shift, like we've done in the past, where I can assign 3 dispatchers days in the middle shift. So if one of them's out, it's an automatic fill, so that gives us a little bit of leeway there. And then if we can get that other person in, which we have 2 candidates we're working with right now, that would potentially open up like a swing shift as well. So that would really help out with some of the overtime stuff. So we're getting up to where the manning should be in there, and if we can hold on to them, we'll be in good shape. So that's why you're seeing that reduction there for
Good.
overtime. And again, one of the things that we've continued to keep the line item for their salaries the same, but we've had a few years where we've had holes, and we haven't spent that. As Mr. Jackson said earlier, we haven't spent that money, so it is a bit of an offset when it goes across to overtime or any of those other things. So, but the overtime with them has always been pretty decent. 23 was a big year on them, but that was, we were down like 4 or 5. So we had a lot of shifts we were filling then. So, but stabilizing in dispatch, they do a phenomenal job.
Yes.
I can't say enough good things about them. I really do have some of the best in the area. They are professionals. That's what they do, and I tell people that all the time. They're not there to be cops and firefighters for the most part. They're there to be dispatchers, and they do great. We had an unfortunate accident last night in Wilmington. It was very hectic. Lots of things going on. I had 2 people in that room, and they did an unreal job. I mean, it's impressive to listen to, even though I'm in the game, so to speak, to listen to them be able to juggle all of what's going on in there and get things out. And very, very impressive. So can't say enough good things about them. They're a great group of people. So yeah, that's kind of really all that it is with their budget. Their budget actually reduced a little bit this year, even with the contractual increase, the overtime reduction, they reduced slightly. So the overall budget, I think, was what, 3.5 or something like that, Eric?
Yeah, I think something like that.
So combined with fire, there's about a 3.5% increase across the board for us.
And best of all, there's no capital.
No, for them, there's none. I mean, a couple of years ago, if you remember, we
Yeah.
redid their entire room and everything, so that's great. I'll be coming back I think it's next year for, microphones and keyboard, you know, the peripheral stuff, it's all equipment, so it is capital, because once we replace it all, it goes up over that 50,000 threshold. But they're in really good shape. We have some good, service contracts in place right now, with the vendor that installed all the equipment and the vendor that brought in all the furniture, the desks and stuff like that move, and we have those checked every year, and it helps. We've identified a few problems early, so they haven't been catastrophic failures and repairs. So we're doing pretty well on that.
Great. Any questions?
No. Chief answered my questions, so thank you. Appreciate that.
None? Okay. Well, Chief, you did another great job. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. No, we appreciate the support. It does help. It's helpful knowing that we have a group of people here that support us and
Oh, all the time,
see what
yeah.
we do, so, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Nice to see you.
Have a great
Good to
night.
see you.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Okay, we have no other business, I'm assuming, and no minutes for approval, but they should be out next week, and we will be approving them on Thursday night, which, just keep in mind, we do not have a meeting on Tuesday, okay? So don't show up and be disappointed.
Okay.
So we'll see you all on Thursday, and no public comments?
Can I just ask you a question? The March 20th meeting, I didn't have it in my calendar, it's probably my fault. Is that the vote,
Yes, it
the
is.
meeting we're gonna vote,
Yes,
our recommendations?
yes.
That was why the 18th for the 3.5 million wasn't
Right.
interesting. That's the Tuesday before, right?
Mhm.
Or no,
That's
are
the-
we trying to,
That's the public hearing.
Well, I said I'd hope to know by the 18th, because that's the night of the public hearing. That's
got it.
What I should have said if I'd been more, I hope to know, so I could say it at the meeting of the 18th.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we're all set, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Guy?
Great, thank you all very much.